week, he's the first person to be pushed around by the Energy Secretary.
He still won't do it. After all the victims, after all the towns, after all the reports sitting on government shelves collecting dust, Keir Starmer stood at the dispatch box at Prime Minister's questions and once again refused to launch a full national inquiry into grooming gangs. And this time, it wasn't just Kemi Badenoch coming for him. It was MPs from multiple parties. It was his own benches shifting uncomfortably. It was a chamber that looked at the Prime Minister and saw a man more interested in protecting the establishment than protecting children. Watch his face as Kemi corners him. Watch him reach for the same tired deflections he's used every single time this question has been asked. Ongoing work, existing reviews. We take this extremely seriously. And watch what happens when she strips every excuse away and leaves him with nothing. In 2 minutes, I'll show you the moment this PMQ's turned from a debate into something much more serious. But first, you need to understand exactly what he's refusing, because the scale of what was allowed to happen in this country is something he is desperate for you to forget. Rotherham, at least 1,400 children, sexually exploited over 16 years. Council knew, police knew, government knew, nobody acted. Rochdale, young girls, some as young as 11, plied with alcohol, passed between men, reported to authorities, ignored. Telford, investigators believe up to 1,000 victims over 4 decades. A local MP described it as the tip of the iceberg. Still no full national reckoning. Oxford, 37 identified victims. Girls trafficked across county lines. The youngest was 11 years old. And those are just the towns where journalists pushed hard enough and victims were brave enough to keep speaking when nobody was listening. Kemi Badenoch's demand is not complicated. A national inquiry with full powers, the ability to compel testimony, access to every document, every cover-up, every decision made by every authority that chose silence over protection. Not another review, not a safeguarding assessment. An inquiry with teeth that can drag council leaders, police chiefs and politicians into the open and make them answer for what they allowed. Starmer's response every time: it's too broad, it's already being handled. We have ongoing work. You know what that means, right? Ongoing work is what governments say when they want the story to quietly disappear. Mainstream media will give you 30 seconds on this story and move on. They don't want you seeing the full picture. Subscribe to this channel right now. We cover what they bury. Hit that button and turn on notifications, because this is far from over. Badenoch stood up, and she didn't ease into it. No warm-up, no political preamble. Prime Minister, will you commit today, right now, to a full statutory national inquiry into grooming gangs with the power to compel evidence? Direct, unanswerable. The kind of question that only has 2 responses, yes or an excuse. Starmer chose the excuse. He talked about the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. He mentioned existing reviews. He praised dedicated work happening at local level. He used the word safeguarding 4 times in 90 seconds. He did not say yes. Badenoch came back harder. Prime Minister, I didn't ask about IICSA. I didn't ask about local reviews. I asked about a national statutory inquiry, specifically into grooming gangs. The organised, systematic rape of children that happened in town after town after town, while authorities looked away. Yes or no? Will you launch it? The chamber went quiet, because she had just stripped away every escape route. There was nowhere left to hide. Starmer's answer. He said he was deeply concerned. He said victims deserved justice. He said his government was committed to child protection. He still didn't say yes. But wait, because that's when something shifted in that chamber, and this is where it gets significant. It wasn't just the opposition coming for him. That's what made this PMQ's different. A Labour MP stood up, one of his own, and she didn't throw him a lifeline. She spoke about a constituent, a grooming gang survivor from Rotherham, who had been fighting for justice for years, who had reported her abuse, who had been ignored by police, who had watched her abusers walk free. Will the Prime Minister meet personally with survivors and commit, not in general terms, not with process language, but commit that every individual who committed and covered up these crimes will be brought to justice? The chamber went very still. Starmer gave his answer. He said he'd be happy to meet. He said justice was paramount. He used the phrase comprehensive approach twice. The Labour MP sat down, unsatisfied, visibly. Her own Prime Minister had just failed a constituent who survived rape as a child with a sentence containing the words comprehensive approach. And Badenoch wasn't finished. She stood again and said what a lot of people watching were thinking. Prime Minister, you won't launch this inquiry because you know what it will find. It will find Labour councils that prioritise community relations over child protection. It will find political decisions made at every level of this party that allowed abuse to continue. You are not protecting victims. You are protecting your party. That landed. You could hear it in the chamber, the shift, the stillness on the Labour benches. Starmer's response was to accuse Badenoch of playing politics with child protection, the classic deflection. The moment a politician calls accountability, playing politics, they've already lost the argument. They just haven't admitted it yet. Because here's what's true. Kemi Badenoch didn't create the problem of grooming gangs. She didn't create the cover-ups. She didn't make the decisions by Labour-run councils to deprioritise investigations. All she did was ask, once again, whether Britain's Prime Minister has the courage to find out the full truth. And once again, he doesn't. Now here's where it gets insane. Because the attacks didn't stop with Kemi. An SNP MP stood up and raised something that had been making rounds in Westminster. Reports that in some towns, police and council officials who were directly involved in the decision to suppress grooming gang investigations are still in their positions, still employed, still drawing public sector salaries. Will the Prime Minister confirm whether any official found to have suppressed grooming gang investigations remains in a public sector role? And if so, what is he doing about it? Starmer had no answer. He said he couldn't comment on individual cases. He mentioned HR processes. He said appropriate action where necessary. Not one name, not one assurance, not one official accountability. Then a Liberal Democrat MP raised the question of Alexis J, the woman who led the IICSA inquiry, who has herself called for a more specific investigation into organised gang-based exploitation. An expert, the most qualified person in the country to have an opinion on whether existing inquiries are sufficient. And her conclusion is that they aren't. Prime Minister, if the person who led your own national inquiry says it didn't go far enough on grooming gangs specifically, why do you think you know better? Starmer said he had enormous respect for Alexis J. He said the government takes her findings seriously. He still didn't launch the inquiry. Mainstream media will not show you multiple MPs from multiple parties turning on the Prime Minister over this. They'll give you the official line and move on. We won't. Subscribe right now. This channel exists to show you what they don't want you to see. Hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to know. Let's be honest about what's really happening here. Because Starmer isn't stupid. He knows the political damage this story causes him. He knows the public wants answers. He knows his refusal looks exactly as bad as it is. So why won't he do it? Because a full statutory national inquiry with the power to compel evidence would require people to testify under oath. It would require documents to be released. It would require a complete reconstruction of every decision made by every council, every police force, every government department that had information about what was happening and chose to do nothing. And a significant number of those councils were Labour-controlled. Not all. This isn't about one party. Failures happened across political lines. But enough of them were Labour that a full national inquiry becomes politically catastrophic for a Labour government. That's the calculation. That's what Starmer is weighing when he reaches for phrases like ongoing work and comprehensive approach. He's weighing the political cost of the truth against the human cost of continued silence. And every time he chooses silence, he's making that calculation again, in public, in Parliament, in front of the survivors and their families who are watching from home, and hearing yet again that the process matters more than they do. You know what that means, right? This isn't incompetence. This is a decision. A deliberate, conscious decision to protect institutions over people. Let's be precise about what a national statutory inquiry would actually do. Because Starmer keeps acting like it's some radical, unworkable demand. It isn't. Britain has run national statutory inquiries before. Leveson, Chilcot, the Infected Blood Inquiry, the Hillsborough Inquiry. These are established processes. They have legal frameworks. They work. What Badenoch is asking for is an inquiry that covers every town where there is evidence of organised grooming gang activity. Not just the ones that made the news. One that specifically examines whether authorities made decisions based on concerns about community relations, political optics, or fear of being labelled racist. One that looks at whether the pattern of abuse, the same pattern, repeated across dozens of towns, represents a systemic failure that nobody has yet been fully held accountable for. That's not radical, that's basic. That's the bare minimum owed to children who were raped while officials chose to look the other way. Starmer's argument is that existing reviews have already addressed this. But Alexis J says they haven't. Survivors say they haven't. MPs from multiple parties say they haven't. At some point, we've already looked into it, stops being a position, and starts being an insult. There was a moment near the end of this exchange that I want you to hold on to, because it says everything. Kemi Badenoch looked directly at Starmer and said this: Prime Minister, there are women watching this right now who were raped as children, who reported it, who were ignored, who watched their abusers walk free. They are not watching a debate. They are watching you decide whether their suffering is worth the political cost of finding the truth. What do you say to them? The chamber went silent. Starmer's answer was that his government was absolutely committed to supporting victims, and that justice was his top priority. No inquiry, no commitment, no yes, just words, the same words, again. And that's the story of this PMQs. Not one dramatic moment, not a single knockout blow. Something quieter and more damning than that. A Prime Minister who had every opportunity to do the right thing, who had MPs from his own party asking him to do the right thing, who had survivors watching, waiting, hoping, and chose not to. Share this video right now, not for views, for the women who are still waiting for an answer. Send it to every person you know who thinks this story has been dealt with. It hasn't. Mainstream media won't keep this alive. You can. Share it now. Keir Starmer was asked, again, to launch a full national inquiry into grooming gangs, and again, he refused. Kemi Badenoch exposed the political calculation behind that refusal. Multiple MPs from across the House revolted. His own backbenchers looked uncomfortable defending him, and survivors watching from home heard their Prime Minister tell them, once more, that the process is more important than the truth. This is not a complicated moral question. Children were systematically raped in town after town across this country. Authorities knew. Officials made decisions to stay silent. Nobody has been fully held accountable. An inquiry with full legal powers could change that. Starmer has the power to call one. He chooses not to. Kemi is still demanding it. MPs across the House are still demanding it. And the survivors who were ignored once by police, by councils, by governments, are being ignored again by the one man with the power to finally force the truth into the open. Subscribe to this channel, because mainstream media will move on from this story by tomorrow morning. We won't. Every time this question is asked, and every time he refuses to answer it, we'll be here to make sure you see exactly what he said and exactly what he chose, because they're counting on you forgetting, on survivors suffering in silence, on this fading into the background until the next news cycle takes over. Don't let that happen.